Tia had always been a hard-working girl. She had a stable job, good friends, and a bright future. When she met Charles, a successful businessman, she fell in love. Charles built his wealth from the ground up and was proud of his accomplishments. He was kind, generous, and treated Tia like a queen. But there was one problem: his family. Charles's mother, Mrs. Scott, and his two sisters, Lena and Mona, didn't like Tia. They controlled Charles's every move, especially regarding his money. As the youngest and the breadwinner, he respected them, making it easy for them to manipulate him. Tia knew this, but believed things would change and they would come to love her. Charles always reassured her. "They'll come around," he would say. "You'll see. They just need time." Tia smiled, hoping for the best. After 2 years of dating, Charles proposed. Tia was overjoyed. They had 2 weddings. The first was a grand celebration at a beautiful venue. Tia had never been happier. She wore a stunning white dress, and the guests cheered as she walked down the aisle. Charles held her hand tightly, and for that moment everything felt perfect. But little did Tia know, her happiness would be short-lived. The next day was the second wedding at Charles's parents' house. Tia was excited to keep celebrating with family and friends. However, when they arrived, something strange happened. Mrs. Scott and Charles's sisters led Tia to a small room at the back of the house. "Stay here," Mrs. Scott said coldly. "We'll bring you food." Tia was confused. "Why can't I join the guests?" she asked. "This is our tradition," Lena said with a smirk. "You'll understand soon." They shut the door, leaving Tia alone. She could hear the music and laughter outside. Tears filled her eyes. She thought about calling Charles, but didn't want to ruin the day. Hours passed and no one came to check on her. The food they brought was barely enough. Tia cried herself to sleep, wondering why she was treated this way. Meanwhile, outside, Charles asked his family about Tia. "Why isn't she out here with us?" he asked. "It's tradition," Mona said. "The bride must stay in the room." Charles didn't question it. He trusted his family, even though something felt off. Tia's family and friends noticed her absence and felt sorry for her, but no one spoke up. The next morning, Mrs. Scott called Tia into the living room. "You'll be going to the village to live with Charles's grandmother," she said sternly. "What? Why?" Tia asked, her heart racing. "It's our tradition," Mrs. Scott said. "You'll stay there for 3 months and Charles will stay here with us." Tia's heart sank. She loved Charles, but the thought of leaving him and her job made her feel trapped. "I can't leave my job," she said softly. "You have no choice," Mrs. Scott said with a cruel smile. "This is what happens when you marry into our family." Tia looked at Charles, hoping he would say something, but he stayed silent. Charles respected his family deeply and felt he couldn't disobey them, especially as the youngest. Tia reluctantly agreed, though her heart was heavy. Charles had bought her a beautiful house before they married, but now she couldn't even live there. She packed her things and went to live with Grandma Miles, Charles's grandmother. When she arrived, Grandma Miles was cold towards her. She made Tia do all the chores. Every day, Tia cooked for 15 relatives, cleaned the house, and worked until her hands were raw. Grandma Miles barely spoke to her, and when she did, it was to give orders. The days were long and lonely. Tia missed Charles and wondered why he hadn't come to visit. She felt like a prisoner in a life she didn't choose. She thought about leaving, But she loved Charles too much to give up on their marriage. He was a good man, just naive about his family. One day, as Tia struggled to carry a large pot of soup to the kitchen, Charles's cousin Nia came to her side. "Let me help you," Nia whispered, her eyes full of kindness. Tia was surprised. "Thank you," she said softly. Nia smiled. "I know it's hard here, but you're not alone. I'll help you whenever I can." From that day on, Nia would sneak in to help Tia with chores. They would laugh and talk when no one was watching. It made Tia's days a little brighter, though the work was still tiring. As time passed, Grandma Miles noticed how hard Tia worked and how kind and respectful she remained, even when treated poorly. One evening, Grandma Miles called Tia into the kitchen. "Tia," she said, her voice softer than usual, "I've been watching you. I can see you're a good person, and I've treated you unfairly. I'm sorry." Tia was shocked. "Thank you, Grandma," she said, tears in her eyes. "I just want to be a good wife to Charles." Grandma Miles nodded. "You've shown me you have a good heart. I'll talk to Charles. He needs to visit you." 3 months had passed since Tia had seen Charles, and she missed him terribly. Grandma Miles called Charles and told him to visit his wife, but not to tell his mother or sisters. Charles told his family he had a business trip, but instead he went straight to the village. When Charles arrived, Tia ran into his arms, tears streaming down her face. "I missed you so much," she whispered. "I missed you too," Charles said, holding her tightly. Grandma Miles pulled Charles aside and told him the truth. "Your mother and sisters lied to you," she said. "This was never our tradition. They planned this to hurt Tia and keep control over you." Charles's face turned pale. "What?" he gasped. "Why didn't I see it?" "You trusted them too much," Grandma Miles said, "but now you must make things right." Charles felt ashamed. He realized how naive he had been, letting his family control his life and hurt the woman he loved. He went to Tia, tears in his eyes. "Tia, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice shaking. "I should have protected you. I should have stood up to my family." Tia looked at him, her heart full of love. "I know you're a good man, Charles," she said gently, "but we can't live like this anymore." "I'll fix it," Charles promised. "We'll leave. We'll start over, far away from all of this." After a week, Charles and Tia packed their things and left the village. They decided to move to another country, away from Charles's family. Grandma Miles gave them her blessing, happy they were finally free to live their lives. As they boarded the plane, Charles held Tia's hand. "I'll never let anyone hurt you again," he said, his voice full of determination. Tia smiled, her heart full of hope. "We're in this together," she said, "no matter what." Charles and Tia began their new life in a new country, free from his family's control. Their love grew stronger each day, and they learned that true happiness comes from standing up for each other, no matter the cost. In life, it's important to set boundaries, even with those we love. True love means protecting each other from harm, whether it comes from outside forces or our own family. When we stand up for ourselves and each other, we create a life filled with respect, kindness, and trust. That's where true happiness lies. Thank you for watching. God bless you.